This is my Dodge R5P7 small block that I bought a couple weeks ago. I'm making this video for a couple friends of mine that I don't get to talk to all that often, but they wanted to kind of keep up with what I'm doing here in North Carolina. And so I decided to make it into a YouTube video so that anybody else that wants to follow along can do so. And my goal with these videos is to make them relatively short, but also packed full of useful knowledge for anybody that's interested in this type of thing. So this is like I said, a Dodge R5P7 NASCAR small block. These were not a OE production engine. There was only about 2,300 of them made. This is number 926. This is an old Ray Evernham engine from the early to mid 2000s, I believe. And it's significantly different from a Mopar OE small block. This is a dry sump only engine. It's a large bore, short stroke, canted valve small block. It is designed to make roughly 800 horsepower for hours on end. It's a pretty neat piece, but definitely a learning experience for me. So you might be wondering kind of how I got this. The NASCAR teams, when Dodge retired from NASCAR in 2012, the teams would sell their excess or surplus engines and parts for the manufacturer that was no longer supporting them. They would sell them to either parts repackers or surplus warehouses or just the general public at auction for pennies on the dollar generally. And this is an example of one that got either sold to an engine builder or made its way into the public hands. And this is so that's partly how I ended up with it. I bought it from a guy out of West Virginia a couple weeks ago, and he was running it in a dirt late model for several years. And the reason that I have it, or the reason he was selling it, is this guy right here. This is the number 1 connecting rod. And so the block has a little bit of damage from the connecting rod coming apart. One of the guys that was working for him wanted to check bearings at the end of the race season and took the cap off of the number 1 rod, but did not torque it back down when he put it back. And so it came off about the first lap they took at the next race they went to. So that's how I ended up with it. Thankfully, the guy did have 2 more connecting rods that need the small end resized, but that's not a terribly big deal. So I do have a full set of rods for it. It's a complete engine, but I will need to find some parts for it. The pistons are not that big of a deal. There'll be a custom set. I do need a crankshaft though, which will be a little bit harder to find, but I do work with quite a few guys that work on these for a living, and they generally have some surplus parts laying around that are decent. This is kind of largely how I got it though, in this crate, and then the other hard parts are back here. A couple of heads, and then the spare block. The thing that makes this unique is the canted valve layout. It's as you can see, all the valves are not in a line, and the valves are actually staggered in the head, so that you can get the intake valve closer to the intake port and the exhaust valve closer to the exhaust manifold. And the more that it also affords you the ability to lay the valve down more towards a 0-degree valve angle, and that in turn allows a straighter path for the air to come into the cylinder and flow more, which is going to make more power. So that's the real trick behind these engines and why they make significantly more power with less cubic inches than a typical OE small block. This one displaces just about 357 cubic inches, and I should be looking for about 800 horsepower out of it. It's actually going to turn it into a drag and drive setup. And this is my 1973 Plymouth Duster. It's a 360 LA with a 4-speed, probably about 300 horsepower. Gonna put this in it with likely a T56 Magnum or something similar as a drag and drive setup. I have a friend that has an R5 in his Dart with a G-Force 5-speed, and it's actually a very competitive and somewhat cost-effective application for what kind of power it makes. So it's a pretty consistent 980s car, 960s. This is just to give you a little bit better visual of what a canted valve head looks like. Traditional Mopar small block, the valves would all be in a line down the center here. They do that so they can get more valve area in the cylinder, which more valve area you can put a bigger port behind, which allows you to put a bigger runner in, which flows more air. And then they also lay the valve down closer to, if this is a 0-degree angle, they try and get it as close to that as they can, because the more the valve stands up, the more perpendicular the air hits the valve and restricts flow. So they try and lay that valve down to get more flow out of it, and the result is a small block that will make somewhere in the neighborhood of 800 horsepower. So super interested to see what we can do with this thing. This is what they call a P7 head. It will not fit any other Mopar small block. It is strictly for the R5. There's 6 head bolts per cylinder for improved head gasket sealing, and yeah, that's about it for the heads, at least for now. Anyway, that's the gist of it. That's kind of the overview of the project, and so if you like, follow along and stay tuned. And for anyone interested in history about these engines, I'll try and do a little video here coming up about some of the stampings on this block and where it came from, what its history is that I know of, and kind of what they did with engine numbering at Evernham. So keep an eye out for that, and I will be back in a few.